I see that we have a couple questions. So Michelle is asking, also when calculating below grade square footage, it has to be interior of the walls, unlike the above grade square footage. Yes, exactly. So we have Cheryl, attached garage. Do we include this? Attached garage, we for attached garage, we do not include attached garage in a total square footage. How about the detached shed that has electrical and is finished? Can this be included in the above grade square footage? So if it's detached, yeah, it's well, how about detached shed, right? So because it's detached, we cannot include it. Even if it has electrical year-round heating, even if it's let's say fully finished, unfortunately we can't, because it has to be permanently connected to the main structure. So you wouldn't include this. See, okay, so here's a question. When we get iGUIDE report for detached home, which measurement do we use, interior or exterior? That's a great question. If we have detached home, we always use exterior square footage. If we have condos, if we have half duplex, if we have a townhouse, you always use interior because it's considered as attached property. So if the electrical is permanently connected to the main electrical, then I can count it. You can, but the building has to, but the structure has to be also connected. Yeah, like as long as there is a wall that connects these two rooms, for example, these two connects, for example, the sunroom to the main structure. Yes, it can be. It's absolutely, it can be calculated. It can be included in total square footage. So once again, maybe I can just maybe one more time. I'll repeat. So there are three. So when we're talking about additions to the main structure, there are three things, that three requirements that should be met for you to include it. First, the heating system is able to heat the space to 22 degrees year round. That's easy. Then second one, the structure is permanent and has foundation or footings. Okay. And the third, the structure or conversion is connected permanently to the main electrical service. Okay, so that's it. Like, but it should also be connected to the building, to the actual living space. Okay, let me clarify about vaulted ceiling. So, for example, here you can see that there is open area, open ceiling. So, whenever measurement professional comes and calculates, for example, we see on the picture detached house, and we see that in this detached house there is an open area. Since it's a detached house, we measure from the exterior square footage. So, exterior square footage I recommend measuring from inside. And then you take a wall thickness and add it to the total square footage. So the way you would do it in this case is, so for example, you come to the first level, you measure it paint to paint. Then you go to the second level, you measure it paint to paint. But then you measure what this specific area is, like how much square feet is this specific area. And then you just deduct it, subtract it from this level calculation, from the square footage. Then at the end, you measure the wall thickness and you add wall thickness to the calculation. So basically you will have first level plus second level minus open area plus wall thickness. That's it. That's essentially, I hope, Cheryl, does it make sense? Let me see. Yeah, probably you should be able to, Cheryl, one sec. Let me see how I can do it. Okay, Cheryl, yeah, feel free to, so I think you can ask a question.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
So we pay for the iGUIDE report. We have a detached house. So you're saying that we can't use exterior walls if there's a vaulted ceiling. We have to do our own measurements. So what's the point in getting an iGUIDE measurement report?
No. So basically, when you get iGUIDE measurement report, it will be already calculated for you without open area. So you don't have to, so you on your end, you don't need to do any extra calculations if you got iGUIDE report. So because our system can see that, yes, this is an open area. We just automatically subtract it from the total square footage, and we will include so as long as you provide us with the wall thickness, we will include it and subtract open area. So if you have iGUIDE report, the work is already done for you. You don't have to think about it anymore. But let's say if you are measuring it yourself, yes, you'll have to manually calculate it, exclude it, and stuff like that. So, but with iGUIDE, once again, you don't need to.
So with iGUIDE, on a detached house, we take the exterior measurements and put it into our matrix data input, correct? And we're accurate?
Yes.
With
yes.
all detached, and then with townhomes, condos, attached housing, we go interior area.
Say it again. Yes. So for any attached housing, yes, you go into you just. So when you deal with, let's say, if you bring iGUIDE to a condo and measure it, you actually don't have to include wall thickness at all. Like, you just don't include it. And in this case, you won't even receive, you know how on the iGUIDE report, you always get interior and exterior. But if you don't provide wall thickness, you just won't get exterior. So you can just take an interior and that's it. But for detached houses, we actually will, as long as you provide us the wall thickness, we will provide you both interior and exterior. But for LMS purposes, purposes, you will be using the exterior only. And like I said, it will already exclude the detached properties. It will already include the ceilings, the areas where the ceiling height is below 5 feet, for example. It will already exclude open areas.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, that's the rule I'm going to use. Attached interior, detached exterior.
Exactly. That's as simple as that. If you want to, I can share. So what we will do, I probably will send email to everybody. We'll make sure that we will send email to everybody with this presentation. Like, it's very easy. You can just always use it as a reference. There is also, we'll share the webinar recording. And if you want to, like, maybe I can find some documentation that again explains it once again. And we also have it on our knowledge base on the iGUIDE side. I can maybe find some information and send it over to you, just so you can use it always as a reference. But yeah, you're right. Detached exterior, attached interior, always. So that's it. So Elena is asking, why would we not just use interior for everything to keep consistency? This is a good question. There are many reasons for it. And there can be different ways of looking at it. I would say that there are so many standards and so many different approaches on what should be included, what shouldn't be included. Like, for example, I work with clients in the United States. They have different standards, ANSI. iGUIDE provides ANSI standards too. They have different view of what should be included, like a little bit different. For example, in the Netherlands, they actually include, they're not only calculating square footage, they're also calculating cubic meters. So they multiply by ceiling height. So there are different versions, different ideas of what should be or shouldn't be included. The argument behind including exterior square footage, including wall thickness, is because, well, there are different types of renovation can be done in many different ways. Drywall, in some cases, might take a lot of space. In some cases, it might take less space. The thickness of the walls is it's quite important in many ways, like insulation or, let's say, noise. In terms of noise, it can be reduced. It can take a lot of space. So that's the reason why for detached properties, whoever developed the RMS standard decided that it should be for detached properties, we should exclude with the wall thickness and provide exterior. Okay, so hi, Suzanne is asking, hi, with condos, should we include balconies in the square footage? I noticed some do and some agents don't. Okay, the answer is very simple. No, you can't include balconies, and I think even here somewhere. One sec. Let me see. I think I had an example here. So, for example, here, exterior square footage, you can see that balcony on this floor plan is indicated in gray. So it's colored in gray. So we can't include balconies in the total square footage. And this is actually an interesting thing that, yes, there are, in some countries, balconies would be calculated, provided, and included. But in Ontario, in Canada, in the United States as well, we don't include balconies. Another question, I thought with condos, we had to go halfway into the wall to calculate square footage. That's a great question. No, we don't do it in Ontario or in Alberta, in Canada, but in the United States, yes. ANSI, so there is a standard called ANSI Z765. And according to this standard, yes, you would go halfway, like you will take a central line between the walls, but in Ontario, in Canada, we don't do it. So you just calculate paint to paint for condos. If you have 1.5 story iGUIDE professional is measuring, will they take off the lower areas for you? Yes, they will. They will. And we will do it on our end as well. Because we can see the pictures, and whoever is measuring, whoever comes to your property with the iGUIDE, they should be able, they should be able to indicate it on their end that this is, for example, there is some piece of it is below grade, some piece of the room is below grade, and sometimes we can see it on our end too. So yes, it should, they will take it off in most of the cases. So when it comes to below grade square footage, so here is a question from Michelle with basement measurements. If there is an unfinished space like cold room or furnace room, it should not be included in below grade square footage. So there is no rule about it. Residential measurement standard dictates only how to measure above grade spaces, but not below grade square footage. So you can include it, you can exclude it. There is really no rule about it. And when it comes to, by the way, wall thickness, just maybe one more point on the wall thickness. There is actually, sometimes it's hard to calculate the wall thickness. There is a typical standard, like so there is average wall thickness, and of course wall thickness would depend on when the property was built, how it was built, but the average wall thickness would be about 4.5 inches thick. So sometimes photographers would reasonably guess what the wall thickness would be, and this is fine. So as long as you are providing reasonable, if it's a reasonable guess and the average is 4.5 feet, like it should be okay. So it's not something to worry about. But yeah, you trust your photographer to do it. Cheryl, thank you very much for joining. But a cold room wouldn't have a heat source. So Michelle is asking, but a cold room wouldn't have a heat source. Yes, it wouldn't. But I think your question was about the below grade square footage. As long as it's below grade, there is no regulation about it. There is no rule about below. If it, let's say, if it was above grade space, then yes, it has to have a heat source and so on and so forth. But if it's below grade, there is RMS doesn't say anything about below grade space. If it's below grade, there are no rules anymore. You just can't include it in total square footage. That's it. You just report it separately. Rhonda is asking, in summation, to be clear, if we use iGUIDE, can we totally rely on this total square footage above and below grade and detached buildings, assuming we have them measure the detached buildings? Yes, we can. So iGUIDE has a LiDAR laser. That's probably the most accurate way to measure anything today. Yes, you can rely on iGUIDE for square footage measurements. That's pretty much the strongest point about iGUIDE, is that we follow the RMS square footage measurements for years. And like I mentioned, Alberta adopted this standard years ago, and the iGUIDE is very, very big there just for measurements on it, just themselves. So yes, that's probably the best way today to measure RMS, to measure properties, exterior or detached or attached. That's what iGUIDE is all about measurements. That's if you can't rely iGUIDE, then there is no point in iGUIDE. So you can actually rely on it. I see there is a question with the old stone homes, the thickness of the stone taken into account. So in this case, inside measurements. No, so if it's a detached home, it doesn't matter if it's stone home, if it's old or new. you always provide exterior measurements. So you still need to measure this, the wall thickness of the, you have to measure those stones, and like the wall thickness of exterior wall and include it. It doesn't matter. Like there is no regulation in terms of what kind of home it is, as long as detached. Suzanne says, yes, that was helpful. My iGUIDE report does not have the areas you are showing, so I will ask them to include in the future. Yes, exactly. You can actually ask your iGUIDE provider to include them. So they can actually, there is a way to see the breakdown of square footage room by room, even in the basement. Or for example, you can see what's included, what's excluded. And even here, if you download PDF floor plan, maybe in the meanwhile, I can show you here. So this is your typical iGUIDE. And even here, you can see that everything is color coded. And when it comes to deck is colored in gray. So it means that it's not included. Charlene, one more question. If we use iGUIDE and it is detached home, we use the exterior for the upper and the lower as well. Yes, we do. Hope it makes sense. Like, so in this case, like you can see main floor, there is a perimeter wall thickness. Second floor, perimeter wall thickness. So yes, we use both. From Suzanne. But feel free to ask more questions. It's the last question Suzanne wants to ask. Does the semi-detached count as a townhouse or detached? Can we use exterior square footage for semi-detached or add back in some of the wall area? So if it's semi-detached, it's still considered as you still should measure the interior square footage because they have a common wall between the properties. So that's the thing. Like as long as there is a common wall, you should include interior. Okay, so I think I don't see any more questions. Thank you very much for joining us today. And like I said, we will share the recording. Have a great day.